Well, we're going to dive into it because we are like, our poor viewers have been like so excited about talking to you. And so let's dive right into it because you were a camper at Interlochen. Could you, I want to start with like the admission process because you had told me that you had a scholarship there and not everyone has a scholarship there. So could you talk about the admission process and let's start with cost, like just
Yeah,
start there.
for sure. So, first and foremost, I went to the camp and I went to the academy. So I was a dual student and a camper. So, the camp, just so people understand, thousands of students, around 25 to 3,000 students, ranging from like, I think you can enter at 8, I think it's like third grade, going all the way up to 18. So
Yeah, it
campers
says on
range
their
in huge
website
amounts.
third grade to 12th grade.
Yeah, so it's a huge amount of ages. The high school kids are on a separate part of campus in cabins, and then the younger kids are on a separate part. We are actually identified by the color of socks we wear. So the younger kids wear red socks, we wear blue socks. It's like a whole, like you can identify a camper from 1,000 miles away because we wear such distinguished outfits and uniforms. So in order to get into this camp, it's an arts camp. So I the camp is a little more easier to get into. The academy is where they make their money. The academy is the treasured, very select. There's around 500 students, and I think that's way more today. I just Googled it than there were when I was there. I think we had around like 350 students. So much smaller experience, very different experience. The camp is rigorous, competitive. It's nuts. Mental health is a huge problem there. There were multiple kids that would go home on what we called emo leave. It was emotional leave because they just would have complete nervous breakdowns. So it was a very
And
stressful environment.
were they nervous breakdowns because of the rigor? I mean, I think what people are trying to wrap. You and I talked about a little bit about this. What people are trying to wrap their mind around is that this is this prestigious camp and the access that the donors had. But I kind of want to set the stage a little bit about just the environment itself as to how these donors would have access to these folks. So number one, could you talk about like how remote this place is? I mean,
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
it's prestigious, but talk about how you had said that there's no restaurants for
There's
miles.
nothing. So two things. So not only is Interlochen within itself a beautiful, huge campus, but it's surrounded by Interlochen State Park, which, if you're familiar with the state of Michigan at all, we have a lot of state parks. They're absolutely wonderful. Interlochen State Park is not one that's like sought after. It's on an okay lake, next to an art school. So it's not like the like after 10 o'clock, you can't have sound. Like, it's just not like a camp that you would pick to camp at because it's not a happening place, essentially. So a lot of people who do go there are sometimes parents who do not have the financial ability to stay at the really nice hotels in Traverse City. They can't commute. So if they're visiting family, a good solution is to stay at the campground. Obviously, that really only works during the summer or the fall or maybe the spring, but Michigan's a pretty cold state, especially up there with the lake. You just get tons of snow and it's freezing. So it's not a
So
like widely used campground. So you're isolated. You are very
so
isolated.
that's the word that it keeps coming to my mind. So a lot of people are saying, what's the connection with Epstein? So Epstein came to Interlochen and was a huge donor there, had access to the kids who were there, and groomed and started the abuse of victim number one, or Jane. So one of the things that keeps popping through my head is isolation is one of the first steps in grooming. You choose your victim and you isolate. And so this seems like a very isolated environment with very open, beautiful people because they're in the arts. And so when you go there, one of the questions that keeps buzzing in my head is, were you put on parade for the donors? Like, talk to me about that experience of like, because the quote, and I will say this, the quote from Interlochen says, "We have no unsupervised access to children ever."
And I'll
So
be
that's
honest with
what
you,
they
it
told the
angers me
media.
so much. It angers
So
me. And I really wasn't angry. I was frustrated and I felt like, wow, just having been a student, this whole thing, like finding this out, every red flag was there, but it's not until you're an adult that you can process those red flags appropriately. So like
Sure.
I as a child, I'm looking back and I'm like, I would never put my kids in these situations. But just to kind of give you an understanding of Interlochen, it's an event area too. So not only do you have the camp there, not only are the students putting on concerts, but you have huge names coming in putting on concerts as well. So on top of the concerts that are being done by students, you have Josh Groban doing a concert every single summer that's sold out. So the entire
Oh,
community, Traverse City, all the surrounding areas are coming to view this concert. So it's not just that the donors have accessibility. It is any adult that enters that campus. And we as students roamed freely. There was no, like, there was a curfew that you had to be in your cabin by, but we had zero supervision. So it enrages me that they can sit back and be like, oh, yeah, so we had a cabin counselor, one for 20 girls in a cabin, but we had someone with them while they're walking around campus and the campus is open to the public. Like that's not true. And two, it wasn't feasible. So I just want to put this disclaimer out there. Two truths can be true, right? So two versions of events can be true. My version of event is true for the 2000s when I was there. I hope they've upped their security. I hope they've done and made changes. I hope that this isn't the case. What I wish they would have stated would have been something to that degree. We have upped our security. We do have more staff than we used to when it came to students. We do at least some type of acknowledgement, because for alumni like me, I look at them and I go, no, that's just not the case. It's not possible. So that's what you kind of have to understand about this campus, is that not only was it a camp during the summer, it was a concert venue, not only for the students to be put on show, but also for alumni, for famous artists to come in, sometimes performing with the kids, using the orchestra, using the band, using, the choir. We would often perform with multiple performers. I performed with Yo-Yo Ma. I performed with Sarah Chang. Like, when you talk about classical music, name a person, I performed with them. This camp brought in the notoriety of the best of the best. So that's why people send their kids there.
so, and to be clear, so these events, these concerts, this access, honestly, really elite, wealthy people.
Yeah.
It's on the camp grounds, like it's on the because it says that it's Interlochen Center for the Arts, and so these concerts were taking place where the children slept, essentially.
Yeah, so you can actually look at the Interlochen map. And I looked it
Yeah.
up just to like make sure my memory wasn't failing me. But, I spent a couple years there. I don't feel like my memory is that bad, but I checked just to make sure. And what's funny is they don't show the cabin areas on the campus map. I just found that interesting. I want to note that when I was there, I have no idea where this Epstein Lodge was. Like, I probably walked past it, but so I actually checked with someone who worked there, who was an adult, so should know where things are. They were part of the administration. And what they told me was, oh, it was by the girls' cabins. So not the high school cabins. So the high school cabins were located in a completely different place than the girls' cabins, so the younger age girls' cabins. Just to be clear, high school kids did not intermix with like the junior high and below kids. We were never in the same areas. They were on a completely different part of the campus. You actually had to cross the street to get to their part of where the cabins are. So when I was told this, like, I just want to like put in perspective of someone who went there. One, you're isolated. Two, you live in a state of beautiful lakes. Traverse City, gorgeous lake. Totally understand why a wealthy person would go there and stay. We have tons of celebrities who have homes on lakes in Michigan. This lake doesn't check out why you would be here. The concerts, sure, we got great people, but you could be in New York City and see any of those names with the New York Philharmonic. You did not need to go to we were called the World Youth Symphony Orchestra, and we were on the radio, and we were a big part of NPR, and we were a good classical group of kids, but You could see Yo-Yo Ma with the New York Philharmonic. Like, why are you coming to Michigan to watch? It makes no sense. He didn't have a kid there. He wasn't, what I find funny about the donation is he didn't make a donation for the scholarship fund. He made a donation for a building. Here's the interesting nugget. So Itzhak Perlman, who is a famous violinist, when I saw that that's who the cabin was built for, and this man, Itzhak Perlman, was one of the 6 people at Epstein's 40th birthday bash. 6 men, sorry, want to make sure that's clear. 6 men that were at his 40th birthday bash, this huge birthday party. Itzhak Perlman was one of them. This guy is the most world-renowned violinist. Like, I've seen him in concert. This guy is like, for classical people, I don't like Beyonce. Like, this is big. So he not only flew this man on his private plane to come to Interlochen, but then used that as his entrance of why he was donating this money, was to specifically have a handicap accessible cabin built for Itzhak Perlman, who is famously had polio as a child and has mobility issues. So great story, right? Wonderful. This is what people need to pay attention to, is the story. This is how people groom, not just the victim, but everyone surrounding the victim. Look at
Well,
this
and
great
now,
man.
so it used to be called the Epstein Scholarship Lodge, but now it's called the Green Lake Lodge. And it's interesting that you say it's by the junior high or the young girls' rooms, because Jane was just coming out of the 7th grade going into the 8th grade, meaning
Yeah.
that she's 14 years old. And this is where Epstein decided that he wanted his cabin. And we know that he had a hand in the design because of the court records that were given to Judge Nathan and given to the public. There are 2 letters from the artistic director of Interlochen at the time to Ghislaine Maxwell, saying, okay, these are the specs that you wanted, down to the food that Epstein wanted, kind of stocked in the refrigerator, etc. So he had a hand in what was going on there. And what I'm finding fascinating, and I think a lot of parents are finding fascinating, is the fact that he went to such extremes to get access to these kids.
And the
And
question
it
is why? Like, that's for me as a student. I sit and I ask, why was this adult? I get he went there, but just so everybody understands how this camp works, saying that you're alumni and then finding out that you were just a camper in Interlochen world, you're nothing if you're not an academy student. So we don't call campers alumni. That's like, I think the like people in charge, the administration, wanting to like flatter him by giving him that alumni title. You are not on the walls of Interlochen's, hallways where we're going in and going into class. You're not a picture on the alumni unless you went to the academy. So what was so shocking to me when I saw alumni on his title, I'm like, he's not alumni. He went to the camp. Anybody can go to the camp. That's not hard. Like, going to the academy was what gave you that illustrious alumni title. So as an Interlochen person, it's kind of like if you give the reference of Juilliard, which I think a lot more people are familiar with the name Juilliard. It would be like someone doing an hour seminar for the art, for a ballet class, taking one ballet class during the summer at Juilliard and then saying, I went to Juilliard. Like, it's
right.
that type of like loose tongue, like, well, you did, but you were actually a student of the academy. So it's funny to me. I feel like that's a very big sign that he was being catered to. And just answering the question of, were we around these donors? Oh, hell yeah, we were around them all the time, because campus was, as I said, free for us to roam. And the story that I read through just online of the victim that is connected with Interlochen and her mother's story, this is so easily like seen as a student or as a camper. One, if she had red socks on, she is under the age of, a freshman. She's younger than a high school freshman, which means that you can identify just by looking at a bunch of girls' socks how old they are. which is insane when you think about it and you think about predatory behavior. Wow, we're putting a label on these girls, how old they are. And you're free to roam. I will say I never saw really young kids roaming when I was on campus, but I saw kids in red socks. I didn't know how old they were because I was a kid myself and I didn't pay too much attention to them. I was a teenager.
Well, and what a perfect environment for a predator too, to be able to distinguish
Yeah.
the really young ones from the older group too. And I think I will say this too: when you live in the Midwest, and you have a donor who has as much pull as Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell in New York, because it's widely known that Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein would throw these parties for Interlochen alumni in New York, and then
Yeah.
they would have these Broadway experiences and such. And so it's easy for me to see a parent in the Midwest going, oh my gosh, there's this New York person who is gonna like help my kid be a star.
Yeah.
And
And I will say, like, just so people understand, like, this school pulled, we had kids from Paris in
right.
my cabin. I had a girl from Paris who, like, just to understand the differences between scholarship kids, me, and then the illustrious, like, if you were famous, your kid got in. Like, I went to school, I can name drop, and I'm not going to, but I went to school with people's really famous kids. And it was
Right.
because this was a place that, one, had a lot of connections. So if you're someone and you want your kid to graduate and have connections, every single university has an Interlochen alum of some sort, whether it's camp, whether it's the academy. There is a connection in Hollywood. There's a connection in politics. There's a connection, literally, you want to go into law, there's a connection in, Harvard, at Yale. There's a connection everywhere. So when people need to understand the power at which these administrators held and what the donors held, and the administrators didn't just bring donors in for the money, they also brought it in for the connections. I mean, it's huge. When I was there, the college campus day was insane. It was like every college, Harvard, Yale, they didn't just sit and tell you about their school. They
Right.
ran after you on campus. We would like
Right.
joke about them. They were chasing us because we were like, oh my God, to have an Interlochen student in our school was such a bragging right. It was so crazy to us as kids. But I can completely see how if you said to a scholarship student or any student that desperately wanted to stay there, here's your option to stay here. Here's this person you need to impress. Here's this hand you need to shake. Here's this person you need to talk to. You're going to do it. This is where you want to be.
Yeah, and I can see that. And Scotty, I see Trish is one of the kids at camp also. And unfortunately, we can't add a third person. I don't know why. We tried with the Brian Middlestat live. It's not letting me. I don't know if I've got that permission to do that. But for those of you who have just joined us, Elizabeth was a camper at Interlochen. She was also an academy student at Interlochen. And I want to segue and say, what Jane was doing. Jane was a middle schooler, and you told us tonight, Elizabeth, that Epstein's cabin was right next to the middle schoolers and where they slept. And so, and
That's what I've
remember,
been told.
Epstein paid for that cabin and paid for, access. What Jane said is that Jane was sitting there in the common area eating an ice cream cone with her friends. Ghislaine Maxwell comes up with a dog, with a mini terrier. They ask to pet the dog, and immediately Epstein comes and joins their group. They already knew that Jane was from Palm Beach. I mean, you could tell the line of questioning that they immediately went into. You could tell that they had done some prep work on this girl, because they're like, "Oh, you're from Florida." I mean, and you're saying 2,500 kids are there. How the heck did they know that she was from Florida without
Yeah.
doing some level of research? And so all of Jane's friends left. Then they started talking to her saying, you're really, really talented. So that brings me to my next question. How on earth, what types of performances are there for donors? Are there meet and greets, or is it just like a big performance? In your experience, did you sit at tables with donors? I mean, were you put on parade?
So we were definitely put on parade. Our living life was kept very quiet, especially the camping, like the cabins. I mean, we they did not. I think parents weren't allowed back there. A big red flag is even now that cell phones are allowed. Like I didn't have a cell phone when I was there, but cell phone. Obviously, most kids have cell phones now. But
Wait, you said parents are not allowed,
in the cabins, no, you couldn't go past a certain point. Like the
but
cabins
donors
are
are.
remote. The cabins are in the remote part of campus nearest Interlochen State Park. So if you're looking at a map of Interlochen, basically Interlochen goes along a little highway and the state park is on either side of the highway, but kind of surrounding Interlochen's campus itself. So just in that sense, huge danger. Like you have a state park with a fence. Like the only thing stopping people from getting there is like this wire fence. Like we
Well,
jumped the
but
fence all the time as kids and would go into the state park because we had a little more freedom there.
so I want to
Um,
be clear. So parents were not allowed near the cabins, but donors were.
yep. So here's the funny part of this that would annoy us as students. We were mad as students because number one, the cabins were
What?
our one safe spot, even though the cabins were literally cabins, not heated, not insulated. You know, it gets really cold at night in the summer in Michigan. We're not a warm climate place. So it was freezing. And we had people who had no idea what the climate in Michigan was. And they would come to campus and wouldn't have blankets or wouldn't have sheets. Or it was a nutty situation. So you're adding all of this stuff on, you know, top of the fact that you're away from your family, which, by the way, now camps are 6 weeks. When I was there, it was 8 weeks. So you were at camp for 8 weeks straight in a cabin with no heat, no air conditioning, bad installation. And so they wouldn't allow parents in. And I think that was partially because if some of these parents who have big, big, big money saw the conditions their kids were in, I don't think they'd be very happy about it. So I think a part of it was that. But also, I think that that was maybe an excuse because that was what the counselors would always tell us. But parents were not allowed past. So, like, I remember carrying my bag towards my cabin and crying because I was like, oh, I don't even know what I'm walking into. And I did not come from a happy, this was like a vacation for me getting away from my family situation. But still, I was like, I have no idea what I'm walking into. And I have no way to like turn around and run if it's bad because my family was just told to leave. Then on
So
add to
hang
that,
on. We have people are wanting to clarify a few things about what you're saying. So why donors and not parents? Why were
so for
donors
donors,
allowed back there but not
I think it
parents?
was a bend of the arm. I don't think that it was like universally allowed. I don't think it was universally offered. I think it was more of like, I remember Josh Groban was one of the people who went on the tour. And it was so stupid because he had gone to the camp. He was not an academy alum, he was a camp alum. And I remember they went to the boys' cabins and were like, you guys have to clean your cabins. Josh Groban's coming back here. Like, and all the boys were like, what the heck? Like, why is this dude being allowed? You guys won't let our parents come here, but you're going to let this guy like, and you have to understand if you went to Interlochen, you saw Josh Groban constantly. He never leaves the campus. He's just always there.
Well,
I
again,
think it's,
isolation, grooming of isolation. I mean,
yeah.
it
And he
like
was there.
everything you're saying is just like a grooming. It's all grooming because
Yeah.
isolation and manipulation
And you know
to
what's
form
funny is
attachment.
yeah, he doesn't talk about it. Like you'll hear him talking about, I went to an arts camp and I loved it, blah, blah, blah. But he doesn't name drop Interlochen all the time. He'll sometimes drop it in interviews, but like me as a camper, I was always like, yeah, he's talking about Interlochen. Yep, I was there when he was there, you know, because it is kind of cool that, you know, this guy who sings Christian songs like went to Interlochen and I saw him on multiple occasions roaming campus. So he was one of the people that was allowed that I distinctly remember because it was such a pain to the boy campers I knew, that this guy was going to come like tour, literally go into one of the cabins. He was granted permission to go into one of the cabins. So he was someone of notoriety, so it was talked about. But did I see adults in the cabin areas? Yeah, frequently. I didn't think too much of it because I'm a teenager who's just trying to get to the orchestra rehearsal, you know, like,
But not
but we saw
parents.
them. No, so like,
Jeez Louise.
and that's what was so frustrating to when I look at just as I'm still a Michigan resident. I wasn't at the time when I was going to the camp, but now I live here as an adult. When I look at the campus and just some of the issues, the
Talk
reviews,
about
I just
that.
yeah. So I
Because you talked about it with me on Instagram, some of the issues, but I think that the viewers are interested in, well, I was. So talk about some of the issues that you experienced there.
So I'll start by saying camp is very different than academy. Camp, the issues I saw there was there's no supervision. You are an adult. You are thrown in as an adult, and I can't speak to people who were from that third grade to eighth grade experience. But for us high schoolers, it was you get yourself up, you go to roll call, which was really early in the morning, and they literally played a trumpet, no joke, to get you out of bed, and you went to roll call. And then after roll call, you were really just free to like either you show up to rehearsal or you don't. And if you don't, you pay with adult consequences. And that's what we were always told is like, you're treated like an adult here and you have the freedoms of an adult, which means that you have to have the responsibility of an adult. And now looking back as an adult now, I look back and I go, that's really dangerous rhetoric to keep telling teenagers that they're adults because we're
And
not.
you had said something about how you knew campers who had relationships with some of the teachers there.
Yeah.
And talk about what you were told about how that was an adult relationship gone wrong.
Yeah. So we were basically, so a lot of situations happened while I was there. Nothing in my department. So I was a orchestral major. So I was a viola major and for a string instrument, and then I was a voice minor. So in my department, very uneventful. We had like 6 violists. It's a pretty small group. We were part of the orchestra. Our conductor was great. Within our group, we didn't have a lot of drama. The biggest drama department was always ballet, and musical theater was like second, but ballet was always number one. Number one, drug use, constant drug use. And this is for academy, not necessarily camp. I didn't have a lot of contact with the ballerinas when I was at camp because there's so many students. But during the academy, there was just always drama. And famously, one of the ballet instructors left while I was there, and we weren't told much except for the fact that he had had a relationship with one of the ballerinas. And then later, just through the gossip wheel, it was, oh, well, multiple ballerinas were sleeping with him. And they found out, which is why they reported him, because they were mad, essentially, because they thought that they were this special connection. And then they kind of found out amongst themselves. So the girl who told, this is, I think, the biggest red flag. No one who ever exposed someone remained on campus. Victims
The
never
students.
stayed. The students.
So
The
the
students
student
never
who would reveal what was
Yeah.
going on
Yeah.
would never be allowed to stay. So the retribution was pretty severe.
Pretty severe. And we weren't told, like, here's the thing, the student would just disappear. So we would be told by administration, by staff, by, oh, they're on emotional leave. Emotional leave was used constantly for students leaving. All the time. Oh, they're on emotional leave. They're on emotional leave. They're on emotional leave.
So bizarre.
So we were just, which is bizarre. And so we were just told that. And we had at one point a meeting because gossip was just going crazy. So our dorm monitor, so imagine this, we live in a dorm in suite-like style. So there were 2 roommates to a room, and then we shared a bathroom. So 4 girls sharing a bathroom. There was one person to an entire hall of students. So we were high schoolers living as college students. Like,
So when you say
truly
one
treated.
person, one adult, so the ratio
adult.
of student to adult is like 20 to 1.
Yeah. Oh, more than that. For academy, more than that. For academy,
okay.
it's a hallway. So it's like, and there's, if you could take it, I can't do the math of how many doors were in our hallway, but it was a long hall. It's like a college campus dorm hallway. So that's how our dorm was built. And there was one adult per floor. So I think our dorm had maybe 2 or 3 floors. I can't remember exactly. And then, but our dorm was like newcomers and freshmen. Ours was like, you didn't have, ours was kind of like the worst dorm to be in. And it was because we were newcomers. Then there was like the senior dorms that were more set up like little condos. You had a little bit more space. You only had one roommate. You just shared a bathroom with them. So there were better places to live. And I don't remember how they had a counselor or how theirs was set up, but ours was
And
basically set up like a college dorm.
And to be clear, again, the at any time a donor could be seen walking through these areas where parents were not allowed, where there really wasn't an adult really to speak of as far as like a decent ratio.
Well, yeah,
And
and you're talking a Jeffrey Epstein type, huge money, flying in on a private plane with a recent college graduate who came to work for Interlochen because their study is like uh, social work or psychology. You know what I mean? So they're like working with students because this is help or their teaching degree. These are young people working in our dorm. We don't have like I mean, I hate to say it, but like real adults. We had like young adults
so
supervising
what
us.
what were the ages of the like an RA? So like a resident assistant or a camp
20s.
counselor. So to early like
20s,
early 20s.
early 20s. Then camp counselor, you can be as young as 18. You can be as old or young as 18. So our camp counselor was like 20 years old and was there to party. We wouldn't see her all day long, and she'd come back. She'd be like, "Oh, the camp counselors are having a party, so I'll be out late tonight." She'd come back covered in hickeys. Like it was just a mess. Like it was a mess. Like you have kids in charge of kids. So imagine if you're this like 20-year-old camp counselor and they're like, hey, this famous, wealthy, rich person who has connections everywhere, because most of these people are still in the arts, so they're going to college for the arts or they're, taking a year abroad or they're doing something in the arts still. That's why you are a counselor at Interlochen Arts Academy. So you tell them, oh, hey, this big deal is going to come tour. Are you going to have the cojones to look at this person and be like, oh, yeah, no, sorry, we can't go back there? And they go, oh,
Right.
no, I go back here all the time. We've walked through here.
Right,
You're not
right.
going to be able to say, they're putting these poor people in positions to fail. I mean, they just really are. And that's what I think is frustrating when I look at it from the perspective of a parent is I go, one of the major red flags that I look at for my kids when I'm looking at places for them to participate, they're really active into sports. I look and see how old are the people who are with them? How many coaches are on their team? Is this just a one coach team or do they have multiple coaches? I feel personally more comfortable with multiple coaches because my kid is not alone in a situation where they're ever going to be made to feel pressure for anything. It doesn't matter if it's really extreme abuse or small abuses, they're not going to feel pressured because there's multiple people around them. So I look at those types of things and I put myself in the position I was when I was in high school dealing with this type of environment. And I'm like, yeah, this story that this mom tells for her on behalf of her young daughter, even though it happened, a decade or so before I was there, I can picture myself sitting there in the grass. I can picture myself, someone walking up. And this common area that they're talking about is truly a common area. It's right in front of, if you look at a map, it's right in front of the biggest auditorium there where all of the events were held. So this little common area is right where Kresge Auditorium was, right by the big, beautiful lake view. This is where they would walk donors to. They would walk you
Well,
past them.
and the fact that the really young ones, the middle schoolers, were in socks that identified them as 13 and 14 years old, this is kind of a everything that you're talking about is kind of a dream for a predator
Yeah.
because it's very lax security. you know, it's
Yeah.
they've developed a need and almost this need for these donors to like them. It's kind of like the ultimate pick me culture. It's like, oh, pick me, I'm gonna perform for you. And the donor the whole time, it's easy pickings, right?
Yeah.
And that it's wild to me, just the lack of oversight. And to remind everyone, Jane was at Interlochen in 1994. So this was in the mid 90s. She was 14 years old, just coming out of the seventh grade. She was a performer, and that's something else that we need to talk about because artists are generally going to be more outgoing, and who Jeffrey Epstein was kind of looking at were the performers. And so these are going to be the ones who are going to be, there's like, cute little things that are in, performance art or whatever. And that's precisely what he looked for. One of the things that bothered me is this is not the only place where he was a donor, and he kind of bought his way into accessing these kids. But Interlochen was the only one of the only ones that did not give the money back. Once they found out, they did not give the money back. Why do you think that is?
I think it's for a combination of reasons, truly. They do not like to admit that they were wrong. They really don't. I can give so many examples of things that were happening just to me, just in a general sense of red flags for a student. Hey, we should check in on the student. Hey, we should make sure the student is okay. And they really were ignored. And then I look at, this is not the first scandal to hit Interlochen. There's lots of things that happen. A
Like
huge
what?
thing.
Specifically, what are some things that have happened?
So specifically, I mean, there's been scandal after scandal for whether it be while I was there, there was a student who came out of the woods with a male student. It was a female student, a male student. She went back into the woods with this student. They did shrooms. They came out. She felt she had been assaulted. She couldn't remember the details, but she knew something had happened. She reported it. She was expelled. He was expelled. But they told us when they were expelled, you guys are making adult decisions, so you need to understand that sometimes you're put in adult situations when you're making adult decisions. Then that student who had been accused of this horrible thing was allowed back on campus the next semester. He came back after being expelled.
But she didn't.
She didn't. And they said it was her choice. They said, and here, I will be perfectly honest with you, I don't know how I would have come back. She was treated horribly. The message that was put out was she was on drugs. She was on drugs. She's expelled because she was on drugs. It doesn't matter if you're on drugs. It doesn't matter if you're drinking. It doesn't matter if you are violated, you are violated, period, 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 period. I cannot say that enough to people. You are violated. It doesn't matter what you want to blanket it over with, but that's what was stressed to us as students. Well, she did shrooms. Well, she did shrooms.
Well,
they didn't finish the sentence. They didn't finish the sentence. She had it coming. But that's what we knew that they were implying.
Well, and they also created a culture among all of you not to report.
Oh,
because
100%.
if you knew that you were going to be kicked out of this camp that could provide a possible future for you, that your parents spent a lot of money on, that's creating a culture of, I'm not going to report anything. The retribution is too severe. A lot of people are asking, what money are we talking about with Epstein? Epstein, over the course of his donations for Interlochen, donated almost just over $500,000 to Interlochen. And he donated to and Ghislaine Maxwell too, by the way. And they donated to other places that were very similar to this, to Interlochen. And most of those places have given back the money. Interlochen never gave back the $500,000 to the Epstein estate. They never gave it to the victims. And so that's been questionable all along about this place.
And they haven't been open about the fact that it's a problem to begin with. And that's what's frustrating to me as someone who went there and understands the culture that was there is, if they took $200,000, let's say, and took that facility that he built, that thing that they now call like a totally different name, if they were to take that and be like, all right, we're going to make this our mental health area, okay?
Yeah.
So we're going to make this a safe place for students to come and to feel safe to talk to counselors. And, it's on a great location, like a relaxing area. I don't know, do something for these students. What I struggle with is I just started Googling my old school, and these reviews pop up that are so alarming. And I don't know how anyone reads any of them and says, I'm still going to send my kid here. I mean, I do understand it because the pool that they have outside of this institution is so strong. Like,
So let's talk about that, the pull, because I think that that also has compounded the victims coming forward, is because of all of the influence that's been said over and over and over again throughout this trial, is that the victims were terrified to say anything because of the level of influence. So can
yeah.
you talk a little bit about how, or does Interlochen indoctrinate all of its campers saying, we know a lot of people,
Oh,
so
yeah. It's
don't
why
mess
you go.
around. Okay,
Yeah.
so
It's
talk
why
about
you
that.
go.
What, so from the beginning all the way to the end, are they, are they repeating that rhetoric of, we know a lot of people, so don't.
Yeah. The alumni, anyone who went there that has any piece of value at all to them, whether it be money, whether it be political, whether it be, like I said, law, anything special, like their names are repeated to you over and over and over again. So one thing
I
I found really funny is that I never heard Clinton's name. So when that little piece, if everyone remembers that letter that was from Interlochen stating that Clinton may visit campus and stay in this Epstein lodge that was built,
Well, and we
um,
don't know.
we don't
We know
know.
that Epstein's plane went to Interlaken. We know, I mean, the pilot confirmed that, and it says in 1994 that the president-elect is going to stay, but it was not specific. So we don't know if that was
Yeah.
the president-elect, of their
But here's what I can tell
organization.
you. If he had, and it was allowed to be talked, we would all know. We would all know. We would have known because it's all they talk about. It's like, I can list these people because we were just told, like, these people went, these people came. Their pictures are on walls. They have pictures of them shaking hands with the administration, with the president, with the, they just talk about it constantly because it's who you want to be. You want to grow up and be Josh Groban. And in the world of arts, we are not, the classical people are not celebrities. Okay. Josh Groban is a really rare commodity in the, world of pop music. That's a rare thing to happen. For most of us, we go to Broadway, you might get a few Tony Awards, but you are in such a huge arena and you are such a tiny person in that arena. So any pool you can get is important. So those,
So
we are definitely reinforced that if you want to be successful in this, you have to stick with us. You will not survive in the arts world without Interlochen behind you. That is
So
how
one of
that's
the
what we're
other
taught.
campers used the quote, and I'm just curious if you recognize this: be cooperative, be pleasing, be compliant, be well liked, or fail.
It's 100%. Like, and it's so
That's
like
true.
I just got chills. I swear I wish I could show you my arm. I just got chills. I was trying to take a drink of water and I had to stop because I got chills. I it's it's despicable that more people are not coming forward because this is the rhetoric we were told, and we were little cult followers following along the footsteps of these famous instructors, and I don't want to belittle the fact that some of these instructors, world class incredible people. I do not
Sure,
want to
sure,
belittle the fact that there were people who had life-changing summers there and
sure,
life-changing years at the academy.
sure.
But there are also people who were victimized. There are also
Yeah.
people who suicide was not unheard of on our campus. And
During
there's a
camp?
not during camp, but during the academy. So
Okay.
that's what I say when I say the camp is very different than the academy. During the camp, you're there during the summer months. It's a little bit more enjoyable. There's a lot more
Somebody
student life.
somebody asked whether or not there was alcohol in the cabins at camp.
So in my cabin, no, we were all very studious workaholics. We
Okay.
did not, we were not. But what would happen is there were weekly like parties. So, and
Oh.
that were arranged by the camp counselors. Okay. So like these 18 to whatever, 20, I don't think there was anyone over like 22, 25. I would be shocked if there were counselors on 25. I don't remember any. They were all super young to me and in college, but there could have been. So they would like create these parties for the campers, and we would go to them, and there was alcohol there. So there was like, yeah, so
Wait,
there would
wait,
be
wait,
like,
wait. Say that again. So the camp counselors who were
yeah,
employed by Interlochen would throw a weekly party and
yeah.
get the kids drunk.
And I wouldn't say it was that. I don't remember a camp counselor handing me a beer, but I remember students handing out beers.
But the
I
camp
don't
counselors who were meant
are
to
there. Yep.
protect The
Yeah,
kids
they're
from
planning
these
it.
donors who were
Yeah.
predatory were the, oh my God. And
Yeah,
this
so
was acceptable behavior.
yeah, no one blinked an eye.
Oh
And when
my
I say
God.
like, so the camp, that's like tame. If I were, do you want to hear a really disturbing story that should
Yeah,
send
yeah,
red
yeah,
flags?
yeah.
Okay. So I'll tell you, I was raised in a very religious, almost too religious type community, very sheltered. My outlet was music and classical music. That's what really got me outside of that world and the abuses that I was experiencing as a child. So this was my like escape. Getting into this camp and getting a scholarship was my way to get out of that horrible world.
Sure.
So when I came to Interlochen, I was just like the most naive idiot you ever met. I was so naive. So I go to the camp. They offer me an opportunity, which is, the camp is a huge gateway to the academy. If you don't get into the academy on your
Right.
own, go to the camp, and they tell you come to the camp, and they might notice you. The instructors might give you a recommendation. So I got a recommendation, and I was recommended to the academy. I auditioned, got in. Short story. So I go to the academy, and just like at camp, there were weekly parties. There was a student planning committee that was supervised by a teacher, by a professor. We always called them professors that would plan these parties. And one of the parties that sticks out in my head, there was always alcohol and there was always drugs and always alcohol. And I'm not talking a little bit. Like the amount was astounding. I mean, it was nuts. And one of the first parties I remember going to was a pajama party. Okay. So me,
All
being
minors.
an idiot, all minors, being an idiot, goes in my pajamas, literal pajamas. Okay. I show up at this party and so two of the big student areas where all the classrooms are big like octagons. And there's big seated benches that go around in this big circle octagon, and there's classrooms off of each one to kind of set the picture. They had taken black yarn and taped it from the ceiling to this big square block, multiple in this big octagon. And there were students dancing in these quote unquote created cages in lingerie. So like boys, I mean, we had a huge LGBTQ plus community there. So they're dancing in thongs, and then there's girls dancing in straight up Victoria's Secret, like lingerie. And I'm just sitting there like, okay, this is kind of cool, but also I'm in like pajamas with hearts on them. Like, I'm like, what is happening? This is not a pajama party to me. And they're like, oh yeah, this is our annual lingerie party. There was staff there. I want to make that clear. Not just normal staff, your professors. Your professors are there. Like, this was wild. And this is just, and how it was narrated to me by students who had been there longer than me, and then also just like in general, just the atmosphere was kind of like, well, you guys work really hard. You guys need to blow off steam. This is your opportunity. This is your chance to party and have fun, and you work hard. So go for it. Like, why are you even like not that's how we were treated, was basically like. And it is true, we did work very hard. You're in school. Our school days were different than most schools because we had Mondays off to allow for like doctor's appointments and things like that, because we had to go off campus for them. So they would have class from Tuesdays till Saturdays, and then almost every Sunday, no matter what you were in, you had rehearsals of some kind or practice or whatever kind of major you were doing that all day Sunday. So Sunday night was our night. That was the night we got to relax, and we got to sleep on Mondays. It was like, you're going to sleep till 4.
So we have a lot of questions coming in because, and
Yeah, sorry. I know
understand
that's a crazy story. It's a nutty story.
Well, but it's setting the stage because this all makes perfect sense why there would be predators literally bouncing around that place.
Yeah.
Like it makes perfect sense why in the middle of nowhere, in the worst, like what you say, kind of the sketchy lake of Lake Michigan. It's not the best part. They're having lingerie parties with minors and professors, and there was booze there with a bunch of minors. And these are areas that the parents are not allowed to go into. That's crazy. Okay, so this is, and there's a lot of people asking this question. So did any of the kids go home and tell their parents? And if so, did they ever say anything? Or Was it just so elite that they didn't want to rock the boat? I mean, what
Yeah.
was the response of
So
parents?
even if you gave, so here's the big part of the culture that I think stopped people from ratting on other people is that if there was a like one report of drug use, they would pull you from class, pull you from your dorms, make you go take a drug test right away. Okay. So if a parent heard a story of a wild party and they called the school, they would immediately like identify whoever they thought was there, whoever the kid reported. They would pull you and do a drug test. Here's the couple problems with that. I'm like in my 30s. Drug tests were way more advanced than what they were giving us. Like it was pee on a stick and it turned like red or blue. Like it was the
Right.
most easy to get away. Like I don't even know how anyone ever tested positive. Like it was everybody knew how to fool them. Everybody knew people would give each other their pee and go into the bathroom and pour the cup. Like if you were doing drugs, you had a friend who was clean and you would just ask them for pee. It happened all the time. So there were ways around these tests and they were stupid tests. They were not serious drug tests where you could actually tell if someone was using or not. So a lot could be gotten away with, but they would treat you like you will be expelled. I mean, there you were just shaking in your boots if your name was called. And they would do random tests and they would do tests because someone would call. But for the most part, it was very much like if you want to keep this fun going, you don't say anything. And if you're the one who poops on the party, you're out. You're exiled. No one's talking to you anymore. This is a small campus. This is not a lot of students. So
So
you're
they're
talking about
basically preying on these kids' dreams of being artists
yeah,
and saying, look, we can make you into somebody, but we're going to do all of these sketchy things and you can't say anything. Otherwise,
yeah.
you're never going to be successful in your art.
And add to that, most of the kids who were unexperienced in these things were the scholarship kids. So we were not the kids who were there because we had money to or a name to get us in. So the
Right.
kids who had money, of course, were those were the kids bringing the drugs on campus. Like they had money. We didn't have money. And by the way, no one was selling it. It was all that's how much there was of it. No one had to sell drugs. They would bring it in and then they would just give it away for fun. Like it was not like there was like a massive drug trade happening. It was just like we have lots of money and we can spend it how we want and this is how we like to spend it and if you ruin our fun and it was what's so sad is it was like it was reinforced by an administration because they weren't busting the kids that were actually doing it. They were busting pretty innocent kids and making
Well, it sounds
examples
like
out
the
of them.
professors were there anyway. And so
Yeah.
as a kid, I think that you would look at that and say, okay, if this is endorsed by my professor, if, you know, the adults that are supposed to be the adults in the room are saying all of this is okay, then it must be okay. And I just don't want to be a prude.
Yeah. And in our political science class, one of our topics that we had to talk about was should drugs be legal? And our professor was on the side of drugs should be legal. So just consider being 16 years old, thinking drugs are so cool and you want to be an adult so bad. And you're in this environment where your professor's like, yeah, drugs are cool. Yeah, drug. And that's literally how we were talked to. Like, yeah, totally. Like you're in the arts, you need to be expressive. Like it was a lot of some crazy stuff that looking back, it's so easy to see now as an adult that are red flags. But as now I also see, oh no, you were just being groomed to one, not report. You were
Yeah.
being groomed not to report, most importantly. So that was something I'd messaged you that I find so alarming is that it's not just the victims who are groomed, it's
Yeah.
everyone around them. Look at this, 14-year-old victim who was at this camp. If her mother hadn't seen the red flags, hadn't like understood what was happening, and I loved what she said. Why is this man talking to a 14-year-old girl? Why does this man? I loved what she was saying because it is so true. Like, that's ridiculous. This guy should not be around young people if this is how he's acting. But she hadn't been groomed by him. He hadn't charmed her. She had, when we talk about Maxwell and her part in this, she
Yeah.
hadn't groomed this woman. She
Yeah.
hadn't. So she was attempting to, but failed miserably because this woman could see through her. This mother could see through this insane thing that was happening. And
Well,
that's what
Jane,
stopped it.
Jane said right away that the very first thing that Ghislaine Maxwell asked for was her mother's phone number. Ghislaine
No.
Maxwell had said, you're really talented. We just think that you're just saying all of the right things, like you're just the most amazing thing on the planet. We think you're going far as a singer. And we can help you. We have townhouses in New York and connections to Broadway, yada, 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 name drop, name drop, name drop. And of course, this kid from Palm Beach, this freaking, like, the thing that keeps bothering me is that she just came out of seventh grade. I mean, if you think about it, she's barely a girl, doing all of the girl things. I don't want to say anything because we'll get booted off, but like she's not, doing monthly things barely yet, right?
Yeah,
And
she's a
so
child,
she's
truly
a
a child.
child. And asks for the mother's phone number, calls the mom, and of course they knew that her father had died of cancer, that they were swimming in debt from the cancer. All of the things, they knew all of this going into
Yeah.
it, and offered this mother a place to live at one of Epstein's apartments and said, you know what, we believe in her so much. And I found the testimony of the ex-boyfriend really interesting because she said the money was never free. The money that they gave me, the
Really
apartment that they
important.
gave me was never free. And it sounds like that's echoed in the Interlochen experience, that yes, they gave you a scholarship, but all of these things that they put you all through, it wasn't free.
No.
I mean, grooming you, isolating you from the rest of the world, isolating you from your family. Huge red flag in grooming. As you are looking, parents, for places to go this summer for camps, if they are isolating you away from your kid, that's a no-go. If you run a camp, don't isolate kids from their parents. It's dumb. It's
Yeah.
just it. We said no to a camp last year because they did that. We were like, no, our kids carry their phones. Our kids, tell on adults. Period. And if you're going to isolate them away from me, my kid's not going to go.
Yeah.
And
It's a
we
huge
just,
part of it that a
yeah. So
lot of
it,
people don't recognize. They believe what they're being told by these
sure.
professionals. And I think that that's what's really important to understand is that these people pose themselves as the absolute supreme in camps, in knowledge of the arts, in knowledge of this is the best place you can possibly go. So when they say to you, this phone is going to distract and take away from them experience and ultimately remove them away from being able to be successful here, you go, oh, okay, yeah, well, you know more than I do. No, you don't. They never know more than you. Like, I cannot say that more. Number one, they don't know your kid like you do. And
No.
number two, they are not looking out for your kid's best interest. They just aren't. You are a dollar sign. As much as it's horrible to say that, all of these institutions are for profit. I don't care who
Yeah.
wants to slap nonprofit on a school or whatever. They are for profit. They're there to succeed. They're there to pay their bills. They're there to make this work. And a way to make that work is to bring students in. They are not successful unless they have paying students. So it's really important to remember that whenever you're looking at anything, whether it be a camp, a school, what is the value that place is bringing you versus the value you are bringing them? And I tell my kids that constantly. If you ever feel like you're in a situation where someone is asking more of you than they're willing to give, that is a big red flag. And I think with places like Interlochen, it's not alone. This is why I think Epstein had so much pull, is because he had all these connections. So he's
Yeah.
able to say to a student, I have pull at Juilliard. I have pull here. I have pull at this
At
university. I have pull
Harvard, yeah,
at
he he
Harvard.
had
Yeah.
he had a he had a quite the list. I mean, he had pull in the West End in London.
Yeah.
They had pull. There's a question: were there any pregnancies?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, all of us were on birth control. You went every single
I
day. Everyone I knew was on birth control for a
Was
number
there
of
a
reasons.
clinic that doled that out?
Yeah, there is a clinic, and in
Wait, wait,
in
wait!
our
A
building,
clinic on the camp, like on campus, that
yep,
gave
all
birth
the medicine,
control.
yep. And you do not want to know how many UTIs came in and out of that place. It was nonstop. I mean, the amount of no supervision, whether you want to talk student to student or student to teacher or teacher or whatever, it was a lot. It was happening around us at all times. And it was just constantly treated like when you would go to the infirmary and because you had a UTI or because you needed to take your medicine or because of whatever.
And
It was always
again,
like,
without a parent at all
yep,
contacted or called
nope.
or anything, just the
If you
parent.
had a UTI, they never called. They never called
Oh
for
my
UTIs. Like it
God.
was just kind of like, here's a thing of like literally, it was here's a thing of cranberry juice. They literally had like the big bottles of cranberry juice, and they just hand it to you. Be like, drink lots of water. Here's this. If it gets worse, let us know. And that's how they were treated. So like no joke. And you'd get a note that you could skip class that day, and that was it. Like they didn't like the infirmary was not treating anything. Like they were just kind of like, oh, you have a headache, you have a migraine, sit in this dark room. Oh, you feel depressed, here, sit under this orange
And
light
they were
or red light.
prescribing birth control.
Well, they weren't prescribing. You had to have a prescription from the doctor, but they would dispense it. So like you
Did
would
Was there a doctor on campus? I mean, or did these
no.
girls just come in with already having a prescription?
Almost everyone came in with a prescription. I mean, there wasn't a doctor on campus. If you had, that's the other thing to always consider. If you had an emergency, the closest place was in Traverse City. And I know we say Traverse City in reference to Interlochen a lot because it's close, but it's close in Michigan terms. It's still like 30 minutes away, and the hospital's like on the other side. So that hospital is about 35, 40 minutes away. So like not when you talk in relation to things that are close to Interlochen, there's not a lot. Like Interlochen's just another small town next to another small town. But when you say next to, it's, 10 miles away. So it's not as close as everyone thinks it is. Traverse City just happens to be the biggest city up there that has an airport. So it's where people fly into, and it's just absolutely beautiful, has stunning views of the lake, has really nice hotels and restaurants. So people talk about Traverse City. But Interlochen is an afterthought of Traverse City. It's just, that's why it was
It's just
so,
the bastard stepchild.
yeah,
Of
and it's annoying
the
to locals. Like some locals
well,
love it. Other locals are like, all these people because during the summer, imagine you live in this tiny little town, and then all of a sudden 3,000 students and their annoying parents come into town. It's not,
yeah.
they don't love us. It's not.
But they're not allowed. The parents aren't allowed to go in there, and so
Yeah.
that is such a red flag to me. I think one of the reasons why I wanted to talk with you on live is because I think parents need to understand what to look for, and I think that that's a big one. If they disconnect you from your kid, that's a no. If they parade you in front of their donors, that's a no. You should question 501c3s that do that in general, though. If they parade their population, be it the homeless or pregnant teens or whatever, I think parading the most vulnerable in order to get money is so debutante. It's like vulnerable debutante, and
Yeah.
it's wild. And
The
I
other thing they
understand.
do a lot is the hero. They do that a
Tell me
lot, which
that.
always grossed me out, which was we saved these people. We saved these students who are from underprivileged areas, and we saved them. Like so we're in Michigan. Detroit is a city everyone knows where Detroit is, at least in relation to talking about Michigan. It's a big city in Michigan that has had a lot of issues, and there's a lot of poverty in Detroit, and it's coming back, and it's really awesome to be, a resident of Michigan when this huge renaissance is happening. But what would happen is like those poor students who were from Detroit, like forget it. Like you were just like, I felt horrible for them because it was just constant like, we like look at how great it is here for them, and they have all this opportunity because they're here on scholarship. And it's like, how many times do you want to be reminded that like you're from a poor area? Like, it was always very icky to me how they really were the hero, and they've been called out like on social media. If you look at their Instagram account, they had a lot of call out publicly on their social media sites about diversity, specifically when it came to staff. They had a very low diverse staff. Camp wise, very diverse. We had a ton, there's thousands of students. It was a pretty diverse campus during camp. Academy, not so much. There was diversity, but it wasn't astounding. It was mainly, the biggest population there is like really wealthy white kids who are being sent there because their parents are really wealthy and they want the name to go along with their kid's pedigree to get into Harvard
Well, and
or Yale.
they want to get rid of their kid for the summer too. I mean,
It is true.
The way I got started with kids was actually when we lived in LA and we were helping the homeless population on 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica, which is really a prevalent area in LA. And I thought, these kids were going to be from, East LA or whatever. They weren't. A lot of their parents were from Malibu. They were from Pacific Palisades, and these kids had just been abandoned by their families, and
Yeah.
families who were, multimillionaires, and they were living on the streets and would prefer to live on the streets over living with their families because their families constantly sent them away, or they were raised by other human beings. And it was just, they were very sad human beings. And so I can see how something like Interlochen would appeal to a more wealthy population. And one of the things that I think a lot of people have latched onto with regards, and as soon as I say this name, it's going to blow up and people are going to go nuts. But one of the things with Donald Trump was that Donald Trump threw Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago. Well, the reason he threw him out of Mar-a-Lago was because Epstein hit on a rich kid. This was not a vulnerable kid. This was a rich kid. It was a kid of one of the members. And so that's why Trump threw him out. This was not, it was fine that he was hitting on one of his staff. Virginia Roberts worked for Trump. Worked at Mar-a-Lago as a spa assistant. That was just fine. It was when they crossed the line of the rich kid. And I think that, the distinction, one, of the camp saying, okay, this sock is this person and this sock is that person, but then also calling out the scholarship kids as going, hey, these are the vulnerable ones, and
Yep.
putting them in a category for the adults as well. All of these things are huge red flags. I have not looked this up, but have they ever been investigated? Has Interlochen ever been, you know, have they ever been investigated?
Not to my now. If someone may know this, I haven't. I searched to the best of my ability to try to find, especially when I found the Itzhak Perlman connection, because this is someone that I looked up and revered my entire life, and so
Yeah.
I was very shaken by that connection because like these other names didn't mean as much to me, and when I saw that name and connection specifically to this cabin, I was shook to my core. Like how
Sure.
it's just one of those things where I'm a victim of sexual abuse, and people know that about me. But when you then realize someone you idolized
Yeah.
could have potentially, and I'm not putting that it was 100%, but I'm sorry, you're associating with like someone who blatantly, it was happening right in front of everybody's eyes. That puts something, I'm sorry, but it's, you are part of the problem. And so that for me, I started searching all of that, just trying to find any type of scandal that was related to that. And I couldn't find anything glaring that was popping out right away, but there could be things there. It would be shocking to me if an institution of that size and caliber hadn't had something, because just like the thing you just referenced, the kids that were a part of these relationships and things like that, that were a part of these wealthy crowds, it's very important to understand these kids wanted to be adults. They wanted to escape the the abuses that they were facing, even
Yeah.
though in wealthy, like abuse is not isolated to a
No.
economic group. So these
Yep.
were kids that were struggling on their own. And one of the biggest drug suppliers that was my friend on campus came from a hugely wealthy family in South Africa, like disgusting amounts of money. And literally, he would lift up his mattress and he had like drugs, cash, like anything you needed. And he would just like give it out. He didn't care. Like, he was like, I'm here to make friends and have fun because I'm escaping my crazy family. It doesn't matter that they're rich. Like, this is my escape. And this is my way of making friends. He ended up like completely vanishing from campus. We were told he was put on emotional leave, came back and was a mute. Didn't speak, wouldn't speak, would not talk to anybody. It was the weirdest, craziest thing. And I'm a kid. I was a kid, and I'm like, this is my
What
friend. I
what
don't even
why
know.
was he there? What was his art?
So I don't want to expose him too much. Like
Okay.
I
No, no,
I don't
no,
want to
that's
like,
fair.
you know what I'm saying?
That's
I
fair. Yes, I
haven't
do.
spoken to this person in decades, but at the same time, it was a very sad situation. And he was in the opposite world I was. He had tons of opportunity and tons of access, but he was still abused and hurt and broken, and this culture at this school of work you until you cannot possibly be worked harder. And I was going to professors, I was going to my counselors, and I was saying, I'm broken. I can't do this. I'm crying every day. Like, this is
Yeah.
what's happening to me. What are these emotions I'm having? It was the peak of post-traumatic stress, and it was being heightened by these very dramatic situations that were happening around me constantly. Then with the pressure of, you must perform, you must be great, you must be the best. If you're not, you're out of here. And not only are you out of here, but you're blacklisted from any place that you want to go. You're not going to get in. And
Can
that
you
happened to
imagine
me.
that that's the repercussion of coming forward, is being blacklisted to your dream?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think is such a huge consequence that they were putting out there, is being blacklisted to something that, that these kids loved.
Yeah.
Um, you know, uh, the reason why I'm interested in Interlochen, and the reason why I'm interested in a lot of the tangents of the Ghislaine Epstein story, is because there are so many people involved in this entire ring. And maybe it's just I'm jaded and I've been in this world for as long as I have. I just know that there's a lot of people who propped people like Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell up. And it sounds like Interlochen was absolutely one of those places that just propped him up and gave them a runway in which to hurt kids.
All
Everything
for the
you've said
sake of
tonight.
a donor. It makes no sense. Like, I truly cannot understand why anyone would want to stay in a lodge on that campus. It makes no sense to me. There is one restaurant in town, and it's not great. It's like it's not great. Look at the Yelp reviews. It's not a great place to eat, but it's the one restaurant in town. Then you double that with the fact that it's not on the greatest lake. It's, you're surrounded by 3,000 students. I think anyone else would be like, not where I want to spend a week of my summer vacation is on a campus with kids. Like, sorry, but a couple kids are fine, but like 3,000, you're surrounded 24/7.
No.
And that was one of the questions I asked to someone that I knew who would work there, is I said, why, number one, tell me what would be the reason someone would give you to want to stay on campus? And the reasons I was given was, one, they were instructor. I was like, okay, yeah, I get that. You're an instructor, you're out of state, which a lot of instructors came from all over the country and the world to instruct there, whether for guest spots or, just for the summer. Then there were really wealthy parents who wanted to stay on campus. And now there is a lodge for parents. There's a hotel on campus. I don't think there's a lot of rooms, but there is a hotel now on campus. When I was there, that did not exist. I had never heard of a parent staying on campus before until this person who had worked there told me that sometimes they did that. But it was usually for a really elite, famous parent who didn't want to be troubled with having to commute to Traverse City to stay at a nice hotel. Because the hotels that are in Interlochen are like, Hotel 8 type stuff. Like, it's
Yeah,
not.
but even then, why? Like what you said, why? Why? Why?
Why? It
Why do they
makes
have
no
any
sense.
business staying at camp?
Yeah, it makes no sense. And that was the question I asked. I said, even like, I understand like the camp might want like a potential president to be staying on campus because that's a cool story, but why would that person, you know what I mean? Like, it just makes no sense, especially if you've been on that campus. You're like, this is the last place you'd want to go. You'd want to stay for a week at a time. So when it said like 2 weeks out of the year, I was like, what? That's a long time to stay on that campus. Like, so to me, the only question I can come away with is that if you're not asking yourself as administration, what are these people's motives? And you're willing to not ask those questions in order to get the donation,
Yep.
there is something wrong. So I saw on here that someone said like, but why aren't you thinking that he used Perlman, in specific to someone that I, cared about and admired, without Perlman knowing? I get it. I get that argument. But this man was at a birthday party. He was in the intimate circle of Epstein. And you're telling me there wasn't one red flag? You're telling me there wasn't, let's say he had no relationships with anyone who was a minor or saw Epstein with him. If I saw someone hitting on a woman the way that the stories that we've heard over and over and over again of victims coming forward and saying, and I heard words like that coming out of someone's mouth, you would not be in my intimate circle. Not only that, I'd probably tell you off. I'd probably get in your face about it and be like, how inappropriate, disgusting. So I understand that people can write this story of like, well, he was this person's friend and he didn't do this around this person. But not only did this person have personal knowledge of it, but this person was in that person's personal circle of being one of 6 men at a birthday party. Like,
Right. Well, and
that
you know,
says something.
one of the things that I think that is should be mentioned about the leadership of Interlochen at the time was that they did know who Jeffrey Epstein was. They did go to parties in New York at Jeffrey Epstein's place in New York. They did. They were in a circle with this man, and the question I would have the same question if a donor came to our 501c3 and said, "Hey, we would like to build a cabin on your farm and watch the kids." It absolutely not.
Yeah.
Every red flag on the planet would go off in my head, and my next call would be to the district attorney.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it
That's
would
why
just
it's like when
no
people
amount of
want
money.
to say that this could be that you have to put yourself in the position of you are on a camp full of kids
No.
with it makes no sense.
And
There's
they
no
didn't have
logical
kids
explanation.
themselves.
They didn't. And that's the
No.
part that like how did this administration not say to itself or question at all? And I would, I really do hope if anything comes of this, of me even talking about it, if anything comes of it, it comes that people say, yeah, there were red flags, and yeah, there were these things that were happening just to validate victims and make them feel like I'm not crazy. This happened to me. This these were adults that surrounded me and told me these were appropriate behaviors and told me that this should be expected of me. And that was not okay. And I just, that's what angers me. What's happening is that Interlochen's making this statement of saying donors are never around students unsupervised. No, I don't even want to hear that. Like, it's so wrong.
Well,
Just so
to
to
me,
give you an example, when we
my
would get done with
biggest
a performance,
go ahead.
when we would get done with a performance, because you would ask this and I'm sorry, I didn't answer it. When we would get done with a performance, you would leave the auditorium and there would be people outside, whether it be local students who wanted to eventually be there, they'd ask for your autograph. Then you would have adults approaching you. Usually you could tell if it was a donor because they'd tell you. Like, because they'd be like, there's a brick over there with my name on it. Like, okay, great, shake their
So
hand.
obnoxious.
So obnoxious. And then there would be alumni, and they would always, I went here in 1964, and I blah, blah,
Right.
blah, and you should feel so lucky you're here. And I performed when they didn't even have a cover on Kresge, and blah, blah, blah. It was just, you would have to sit there and listen to these people blabber on and tell you about how lucky you were to be there and how they experienced it when they were there. So when they say that there weren't adult, even just I feel like they're using that word donor and really focusing in on it. There were adults unsupervised around us consistently at camp. Whether you want to say it's a donor, other parents, people from the community coming in to watch these concerts that were happening on a weekly basis on our campus, they were around constantly. So to say that to make that generalization, I think is so dangerous. I think it's completely not admitting that they should do better. And that's what I would expect for them is do better. Like inspect your donors more. You have the privilege of doing that. You're not struggling as hard as you're pretending to. When you talk about tuition, $70,000 a year for the academy. The camps, thousands and thousands of dollars to send your kid there. And then on top of it, the alumni and donors that they do already have, and you're telling me you can't hire the staff to protect kids? You don't need security guards. You need qualified counselors. You need people who are going to listen to children when they say, I feel X, Y, or Z, and help them.
And
it's
also
such a big
look
picture
for
thing.
and look for warning signs too.
Yeah.
When I'm sorry, but I teach college, and my 18, 19, 20-year-olds are not going to be able to see a change in behavior, or not all of them, maybe some of them, but they're not going to be able to recognize change in behavior of a middle schooler who obviously is changing behavior because of abuse or because of something they saw or what have you, they're going to avoid it. And I think it was really powerful what you said, that, you know, your counselor that was supposed to be watching over you all will go party every day. And then she
Yeah.
looked at the entire experience as a party. I think that that's fair. I mean, they're young.
Yeah.
My goal out of all of this is that, you know, I saw a couple of news organizations pop in and out of here tonight. What I'm hoping is that they will go do a deep dive in investigating this. And I hope that parents are going to be knowledgeable enough to start asking the right questions to change policy. Because obviously, Interlochen is not the only place that's going to distance and isolate your child away from parents. And I think parents run this like constant battle of, I don't want to be too helicoptery. I want my kid to go out and learn and be independent and all the things. But at the same time, there's so much predatory behavior. It's so excessive, or at least I see it as being a real problem. Maybe it's because I'm around it a lot, but you know, parents have to do their due diligence and be helicoptery. You know,
It is,
ask
I
all
mean,
of
it's
the.
true. It's for me as, you know, a kid in that situation. I did not have parents who were going to notice, nor unfortunately care. I mean, this was not their thing. I just did not have parents like that. So
I'm sorry.
for me, I look at that situation and I'm shocked I wasn't a victim. And I think the only reason I wasn't was because I was not a part of the crowd. I was like, which could make you a victim as well. But like, I just was, I was dealing with a lot of my own trauma and I was not available to anybody. I was in my dorm room a majority of the time. And when I came out of my dorm room and I'd go to these parties, they were overwhelming. It was too much for me to handle.
Right.
And it was, you know, these situations were happening around me and they were re-triggering my own trauma. You know, you have supervisors, you have, you know, people above you like re-victimizing victims. You as a victim then feel re-victim. It's a whole cycle. So for
Well,
me, it was
and
hugely traumatizing.
well, for also, I think we need to mention that one of the steps of grooming is manipulation to form attachment. And so the professors being at these parties saying that they can help you in your career and make your dreams come true, Epstein doing the same thing, that's manipulating a situation, a dream, you know, parents into forming an attachment. And because the next step after forming that attachment is accepting the abuse. Okay, I'll deal with it. I'll accept this abuse because it's going to get me something. I've had so many people come onto my threads and say, well, these 17-year-old girls knew what they were doing. And to that I say, our brains are not fully formed until 25 years old or older. And a 17-year-old, as brilliant as a lot of 17-year-olds are, and I'm not trying to degrade them, a 40-year-old woman who has an Oxford education, you are no match for her.
Yeah, you're not.
It's
You're
she
not.
was. I mean, she's charming. She's brilliant. Someone on here said that narcissists are really charming in their behavior, and that's absolutely the case in this. And I feel like Interlochen, I hope to God somebody does investigative journalism on this, or someone investigates this, because I feel like the entire experience groomed the children for these predators to come in, and that's terrifying to me.
It is
I want to
terrifying.
get I want to get a couple of questions. Someone said, when you met Josh Groban, was he creepy?
Oh God, it was so long ago. He was just. I will be honest with you. My opinion was like total nerdy dude. Like he just was geeking out to meet everybody. Like he would meet anybody and everyone. So I've heard like that's not the first time I've had someone ask me that question because of their own personal experiences at concerts or going backstage or whatever, and being told that. I didn't have that experience with him, but like
Okay.
I was. I mean, here's the thing. I was a nerdy little kid. Like I was not some, you know, knockout blonde or I just wasn't. I was super self-conscious and would hide my face, and so this guy was not going to be flirting with me. So or anyone I was hanging out with. So he just was like, "Oh, you guys are students?" Like, you know, that's kind of the energy I got off of him, but I will say, I don't understand wanting to be on campus all the time. If it's like I understand maybe if you like that's where you know, like you peaked kind of in high school and that's like where you were most famous was on Interlochen's campus. I get that, but he's like world acclaim. I don't think that Interlochen's the only place he could get a lot of, you know, admiration at. So I did find it odd how he was just always he was a constant guest on campus. Um,
One of so the follow up to that is what purpose would donors have to be in the cabins of the students? I mean, obviously, for those who just joined, parents were not allowed in the cabins, but what purpose would a donor have to be in the cabins?
I don't see there being a purpose for the donor. I really don't. And to be honest with you, it is when you read negative reviews about Interlochen, one of the things that parents complain about is that they weren't aware there wasn't air conditioning, that they weren't aware there were only 2 showers, that they weren't aware, like you're just not aware because you don't see it until your kids come home and tell you. And so when that happens, then you're alarmed, then you're outraged, then you're frustrated. So it doesn't make sense why they'd come into the cabins. They're not cute. They're not anything to look at. It's probably the worst place you'd take them. So I don't understand the motivation to go unless the donor is specifically asking for it. And like I said, you have some big, powerful person insisting on something. Are these 20 something, you know, 20 somethings going to be able to feel powerful enough within themselves to say no? These are not, when I say tours are going on for donors, administrators are not giving these tours. It is student led, like alumni, like camper counselor led, like it's like staff, you know, it's not the big wigs of the community that are giving these people tours.
When they did go on a tour, were they able to just go on their own? Like, so if Josh Groban was around all of the cabins, did he have a, you know, a chaperone, so to speak, to walk around these places with him, or was he alone?
If it was a tour and they were doing it to like show them a new building or new practice facilities, which was the main reason a returning guest would be taken on another tour, would be to show them something new to the campus, because a returning guest or someone who went there has seen everything. Like, why would
Right.
Josh Groban want to see the cabin? He stayed in a cabin. They haven't been updated. Like, there's no reason to see a cabin again. So that's the thing that makes you question, like, why are these tours happening constantly? So what I would say is, yes, a structured tour, someone is with them. Like I said, it was
Okay.
usually a camp counselor or something like that. But then after the tour, it was usually like, all right, here's so the cafe that they talk about. I find it funny that they call it a cafe because it's called, the name of it is the Melody Freeze. And it's just a little, like, it's right beside the scholarship shop where you can go buy souvenirs or pencils or things like that. And those two buildings are kind of one. And they usually end there. And you can go in and buy stuff. And then you're just kind of like, the person's like, all right, that was a great tour. See you around campus. Bye. So then that person, that donor, former student, whatever, alumni, is left to their own. So can they walk back into the cabins? Sure. You know, you want to say there's security. There is a like female staffer sitting on it with a clipboard. Like, you can get around her very easily. Like, this is a huge campus. Like,
Well,
it's
and
not Fort Knox.
someone in the comments just said that the theater students were encouraged to change in front of one another, and you said that there were 2 showers for a big dorm. So is it fair to say that kids, you know, walked around with not a lot of clothes on?
Oh, completely fair. Yeah, because the cabins themselves, it was a couple showers, you barely had hot water. I mean, it was like you were living in a very basic cabin with not a lot of luxury at all. There was no luxury.
You
So,
know, I hope that because I think we should probably close it out and take a few more questions. I hope that someone who saw this tonight will press the media and press the various people around your community, because the media coverage I've seen on Interlochen around your area, it's very favorable. It's,
yes.
oh, this place is amazing, and it's very favorable in not really investigating anything that they've ever done wrong. I just see a lot of, oh my God, look at this person. Aren't they great?
Yeah.
And look at what they've done for our community. I haven't really seen a whole lot of complaint other than like the former campers on Reddit. And like, if you start to deep dive into it, you'll find some folks, and like you know, there are people who are talking about it, but it's rare because of how many people, you know, or how
Well,
well
I will say
connected
too,
this
this
is.
doesn't affect me today. I'm not in the arts world at
Right.
all. So it doesn't
Right.
affect me. If you're still in the arts, if you are working for a university, if you're attending a university, if you're still connected to that. You out this place that told you, and this is what's so frustrating is you got there on your own merit. If anyone's listening to this who went there, you got there on your own merit. They did nothing for you. You worked hard on your own. Those
Amen.
people didn't, it's just the name and them telling you that that's what got you there.
Hmm.
But it's a powerful thing. I mean, I tell random people that I like went to an art school up north and they go, I'm not even in my state. I'll be like traveling to California and I randomly like on a business trip. I'm like, yeah, I went to an art school up in northern Michigan, blah, blah, fell in love with the state. Oh my God, you went to Interlochen? It's all the time. Like it is a well-known place to people in the arts. So it's sad because for me, it's like my husband even asked me, he's like, are you sure you want to do this? This seems like a really and I was like, I have nothing. What are they going to do to
Hmm.
me? I'm not in the arts at all. I'm not going to be involved in any university thing. I'm not. And I think that that's a very important thing to distinguish. People who are going on Reddit as a, just an anonymous user, their stories are still valid because they're still not safe to tell their story. So what I hope happens is a journalist does take this on head on and finds the people, finds the opportunity to talk. So that way these people who feel trapped and unable to speak
Yep.
get some freedom and, you know, lose some of the fear. But it's
Yep.
real fear. Like it needs
Yep.
to be validated that like, please do not victim shame. Please do not say people should be speaking out. This is a scary institution. This is real. They have real impact on people's careers, jobs, futures. I would never out anybody I went to school with. I would never talk about anything unless someone gave me permission because it really could screw you up. They really do have abilities.
And
So I
hang
want that
on,
to be important.
let me be clear. No, they can't. They can't, because at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, if you speak truth, they can't do shit to you,
No, I
because
agree. You're right.
you can just say, you know what, this is what they did,
Yeah.
because that, and because we're in 2021, if it would have been 30 years ago, I would say, yeah, it's a problem. But I think in 2021, when you say, you know what, you don't get to treat me like that anymore, and you sure as hell don't get to say, hey, I'm going to have professors get kids drunk and then prep them for our donors. Nope, you don't get to do that.
Yeah.
And I think any art student that's out there who thinks that, oh God, they've got me, you know, they could ruin my career, please understand, no, they can't. No, they
Yeah, and I
can't.
think that's huge. That's what I want people to know is like
No.
the idea that someone did something for you, like when you're that talented, when you're that hardworking, like these students, like it is insane. When I talk about mental health at that place, it is not just the abuses. It is the insane pressure that are put on these little people, these poor little souls that are just like wanting to be the best of the best for a multitude of reasons, not only
Yeah.
for their own success, but also just because of their own competitive nature sometimes. And they are just they are not safe there. I can just tell you from my own experience.
Starting
I
in
was
the third grade.
starting in the third grade and
Yeah, that's how
they had to
young they are.
change the camp because so it used to be a 8-week program and every single week you had to audition. Every single week you had to re-audition for your spot in the orchestra. And there were people breaking bows, breaking violins. I'm not even making this up. Like having I had a mental breakdown in one of my auditions, bawling, crying, couldn't finish my audition. And the people running the audition who are guest instructors felt bad for me and were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." But then when I got to the counselor that was supposed to help me, it was this is how this works. If you're not able to do it, you need to leave. So
And
that's the
to
type
that
of
I say,
atmosphere.
I mean, look at all of the people who are on TikTok who are getting recording contracts, or are choosing not to, and selling their music on their own, and gaining a huge audience. You don't need some dipshit who's sitting there saying, you have to audition for me to have worth, and you
Yeah.
have to do all of these terrible things. And I hope we have a lot of young people that do watch us, and I have a lot of young people who contact me all the time. And it's something that I say over and over and over again. You don't have to be scared of an adult, and you sure as hell don't have to respect them. You can say your truth. You can say no. And if there was one theme that happened over when I was listening to all of the victims, it's that they couldn't, they were terrified to say no. Did I lose you?
Yeah.
Terrified
It's
to say no.
yeah. So
But yeah. Well, I think that we should probably end it because we're kind of coming and going, and I started to get some feedback, like it's kind of stopping on my end too. But Elizabeth, I just want to thank you. This was super brave of you. I can't thank you enough. I feel like your story is super impactful, and I hope that you continue to talk about it. You now have a little bit of an audience of people who are really interested, and so all of the things that you come up with after the fact, like if there are things that you're like, oh man, I please make videos about this, because I think that your bravery is going to help other people be brave.
yeah.
And this place needs to, if they are still indeed having these practices every single day of these kids' life, it needs to stop.
Yeah, and I would say, I would add to that that I saw a lot of comments streaming through that were, I went there and I loved it, or I live near there and it's a beautiful place. And I would say both can be true.
Yes,
And
indeed.
if you believe that it was a beautiful place, please cherish that. That is
Yeah.
wonderful. I'm so happy that you have that. But there are also people who are hurting, and we need
Yeah.
to give them the same empathy and respect. And I think that that is something that I resoundingly want victims to hear is
Yeah.
we are here to listen.
Yeah.
Both can be true. I can
Yeah.
have had a great time and you could have had a horrible time. And I need to hear that because both are important stories. So it is, I just really want to like just say that to your listeners, to everyone who's out there listening right now. Please be kind. Please do not put any pressure on these people. If they want to come forward and say their story, it's okay that it's different than yours. It's okay
That's
that it's
right.
different than yours.
Well, and I always, a lot of the kids out here will have horrific things happen to them by a family member, but they still feel love. And it's such a pull at the soul where it's like, I love this person, but they also hurt me in a way that is painful. And I constantly am telling them it's okay to feel both things. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be an or, it can be an and then you kind of just start to go through therapy and learn how to distance from that. But don't judge yourself on the and.
Yeah.
It
100%.
doesn't have to be an or thing. Well, it's either this or that. It can be a both. And so I
Yeah.
agree with you completely, Elizabeth. And I hope you continue to tell your story. And I really thank you. And I hope people, some journalists, reach out to you and break this part of this tangled web wide open.
Me too. And thank you so much for doing this. It's for people like me who, I don't use social media a lot. I don't have, the ability. If I put it live, who knows if anyone would ever see it on my own. So it's huge. And I will tell you that I know that this is impacting lots of people and changing lots of people's minds and opening their minds to be able to see someplace that they saw as,
Yeah.
their savior or the ultimate or whatever, as maybe there are questions that need to be answered and maybe there's accountability that needs to happen. And if any, or the ultimate or whatever, as maybe there are questions that need to be answered and maybe there's accountability that needs to happen. And if anything else comes from that, that's what I hope. This is a truly beautiful place that has a lot of positive things, but it can't continue if this is happening. And if they're not willing
Yeah.
to change it, then it just simply has to end. It just
That's
really,
right.
there really isn't, there's no one or the other.
Nope.
It's either you take accountability and you start to change these things, change the rhetoric, change the script completely how you're talking to students, or show that you have, like, everyone wants the best, right? Let's hope that they already have. So show us that you have, let us know that you have, talk about it, be socially appropriate about it. but don't send out statements saying that this doesn't happen. Don't
right.
pretend it doesn't, because there's a long record of, just when I was there, of these types of things happening. And I'm not going to speak for every victim because that's not fair. It's not my story to tell. But I can tell you that there were multiple people there that had things happen to them. So it's just unfair for them to put out that blanket statement. So that's just where I would leave it, is
Okay.
feel free to
Well,
contact me. And
yeah, we might have you on again. I mean, I might get a billion different questions now that we've figured out how to do it, right?
yeah.
But thank you so much, Elizabeth, and I hope you have a really good new year, and we will talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good
See
one.
ya.